Good evening. We are so glad to have you here tonight, and hope you had a good dinner and you're not just windblown and blown away. What a change we have had in our weather, and it's good to be able to be here together in this nice, warm, calm sanctuary. Let's bow for a word of prayer. Oh God, we thank you for the gift of your amazing grace, the love that wraps us all into your arms and gives us a sense of peace and hope. We thank you that we can be a family of faith where we come together to worship you, where we seek to grow in our faith, and where we wait for you to lead us into mission out in the community. As we gather here tonight, we pray that you pour out your Holy Spirit upon us, that we might hear you speak, and that we might be able to grow ever closer to you and to one another. Bless us in this time now, for it is in Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Tonight what we're going to do is just a little different, and I'm looking around and noticing some of you, man, you're a glutton for punishment. You've been to these all-church meetings before and you're back, and I hate to break the news to you that the presentation's the same. So, however, what we're going to do is a little different tonight, and that is we're going to first of all go through our presentation and then actually wrap it up to where we're going to wind up having Darcy Shine, chairperson of our administrative board, cannot be here tonight. Her grandfather died, and so she's traveling to be with her family, but we have her on video from the last time that we were doing it, so we're going to see Darcy making her presentation, and then Wendy will make hers, I'll make mine, Josh will make his, and then I'm going to come back and bring closing remarks, and then we're going to go to questions. Usually we go to questions, and then I'll go to closing remarks, but since this is Wednesday Night Alive, I figured after an hour I'd lose a bunch of you. So if you can stay if you can stay longer, Randy, then we will answer questions. If you can't, then it's perfectly okay. I just want you to know we will not take offense at anybody having to get up and leave. I know other family members may be getting out of choir, or you have kids, or whatever it may be. So we'll take questions at the end, like we always do, but we're going to go ahead and finish our presentation first. So, Brent, why don't we welcome Darcy Shine?
So today, I bring you recommendations from all of our church committees, from the trustees, the finance committee, management council, and staff parish relations. Each one of our church committees has voted to recommend to you that St. Luke's disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church. And a couple of weeks ago, the administrative board voted to pursue that disaffiliation with a vote of 73-2. I certainly never would have guessed that I would be up here making this recommendation to you today, but it is such an important time in the life of our church. And I know that you are here spending your Sunday afternoon because you care deeply about St. Luke's and our future. And I'm here because I believe, along with the lay leadership of our church, that disaffiliation is the way forward for St. Luke's. So first, a word about how we got here. And I'm going to give you just a little bit of perspective from the lay leadership side. As you know, we are here because of changes made to the Book of Discipline regarding human sexuality, and in particular, the mandatory punishments. There was much discussion about this issue back in 2016 at the general conference level, and immediately our leadership teams were receiving reports, doing research, having discussions, and looking at this issue from all angles. I have had the great privilege of serving alongside so many incredible leaders. I see many of you out in the audience today. We have served for about 7 years in looking at these issues, and two things that stand out that I wanted to share with you. If I was sitting in your seat, these are things that I would want to know as how we approached this issue. First, we did our homework. We did a lot of homework. Just like everything else that we do at St. Luke's, we dig in and we do the work, and that's how we approached this. Our leadership committees, past and present, have spent countless hours considering this issue from every angle. And our clergy, they have spent time at the annual conference level and at the general conference level working to make change from the organization from within. For me, the most difficult part about watching all of this unfold after so many years is that there were several opportunities that the General Conference, our overall governing body, there were so many opportunities to take a different path, a path that allowed differing opinions, that allowed for inclusivity. And instead, what ended up in the Book of Discipline was the opposite. And I can tell you, the more that we looked at this issue from every angle and what it would look like to stay, it became even more clear that we must go. And given the deadline, we must go now. The other thing that stands out in our consideration is a deep respect for the mission and the spirit of St. Luke's. I imagine most of you in this room could recite the mission statement with me, as we are here to share God's love and bring hope to the world. That is who we are. We're a church who loves God and loves all. We're a church who welcomes different opinions. So when we see one issue singled out for punishment in our denomination's rule book, it just doesn't line up with who we are. It's just not a fit. So do we want to leave? Absolutely not. But staying, that would mean ignoring the punitive spirit that's in the Book of Discipline, and it would also mean ignoring who we are as a congregation. So when we look at how do we stay true to ourselves, how do we continue to be the St. Luke's that we all know and love, the answer is, again, we must go. I've been asked several times what it's like to be in this role during the discernment process. It's hard. It's hard. I wish I could say it was as cool as when we got to open Edmond or took all of our worship services online or started the mobile market. There's so many important things that we do together as a family of faith. But I believe this work and this step is equally important and something that will set us up for a strong future. This quote from John Wesley, I think, says it well. "He who governed the world before I was born shall take care of it likewise when I am dead. My part is to improve the present moment." That's our part. Our part is to improve the present moment by sharing God's love and bringing hope to the world. And I feel that there's more that we can do. St. Luke's is uniquely positioned to make such a difference as we grow in our faith and we serve our community. This is certainly a very difficult step, but it is a step forward that we need to make in order to continue to share God's love and bring hope to the world. So thank you. Thank you for being here today.
I want to read to you from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 22. "Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?" And Jesus said to him, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment, and a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the law and the prophets." If you want to know what Jesus felt about any issue or topic, or if you want to know what God's will is for your life, go to the Gospel of Matthew and turn to chapter 22 and read those verses. God's will for us over all things is to love God and to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so these are kind of the bedrock of what we believe at St. Luke's. Most importantly, they are what Christ himself thought was the most important thing for people to do, to love God and to love others. Those words of Christ are still true today. And as a family of faith, we consider that our calling card to go out to love God and love one another. The reason that we feel that it's important to disaffiliate from the United Methodist denomination is because we feel that the harsh language of the Book of Discipline doesn't reflect the love of God. One of the many great things about St. Luke's is that we come from a variety of backgrounds, experiences, and we have a variety of beliefs. Now, we also have We might believe the same things on one issue, but we'll have differing degrees of how passionate we are on any one issue. The problem of the denomination is that the Book of Discipline states a belief for all of us. It mandates what we are to believe in that one issue. Now, we have been talking about this since General Conference 2016. And then, in the specially called General Conference of 2019, we saw that the harsh language actually was ratcheted up. And so for 50 years, you'll hear that we've been talking about this for 50 years, arguing about it, and it's only gotten harsher throughout those years. In 2019, additional punitive language was added to the Book of Discipline. You need to know that for any clergy person in the denomination, there are a list of chargeable offenses, and they are criminal acts, such as stealing from the church, racial or sexual discrimination or harassment, sexual abuse, child abuse. Those are all criminal acts. And in the midst of that list is also presiding over a same-sex ceremony. Now, we have different beliefs on issues surrounding human sexuality. And I want to ask you to set your beliefs aside for just a moment and just consider the list itself: child abuse, sex abuse, stealing, presiding over a wedding. You may not agree with it, but it doesn't fit in the context of that list. What 2019 General Conference did is institute mandatory punishment for one of those chargeable offenses. It says in the Book of Discipline that if a clergy person is charged and found guilty of presiding over a same-sex ceremony, they will be, on their first offense, put on leave without pay for 1 year. On the second offense, they are basically kicked out of the ministry. The officers of the church court that presides over that case, they have no say in what happens to that pastor. If that pastor has been found guilty of doing that ceremony, the Book of Discipline mandates the punishment. Now, if somebody is found guilty of stealing from the church or racial discrimination or sex abuse, there is no mandatory punishment for that, only for presiding over a same-sex wedding. Now, we have, for us, that is just so offensive. It's not only about the issue of how do you treat one another, but the issue of the theology of grace is at hand. When you have mandatory punishment, you can't have grace. The theme of the Bible is one of grace. Thank goodness we don't have mandatory punishment as the message of Scripture, because we'd all be in a world of hurt. For the Methodist movement, John Wesley really understood that grace is at the heart of God's love, and so the Methodist movement was built on grace. At St. Luke's, it's part of our DNA. And so we find the language of the Book of Discipline so offensive because it denies the grace of God and replaces it with this mandatory punishment of humankind. And let me tell you that when you have that kind of in your Book of Discipline, your rule book, this notion of no grace, no more mercy shown, it doesn't just apply to one issue, it permeates the church's entire theology. And so we find it so offensive that we feel that there is a necessity to disaffiliate. One of the things that also happened at the specially called General Conference of 2019 is that in addition to the paragraph 2553, which allows for any church to disaffiliate based on issues surrounding the language of the Book of Discipline or the actions or inactions of the denomination in regards to that language, it also gave a gracious exit in that a church that wants to disaffiliate because they disagree with the language is able to, and the trust clause is set aside. Now, the trust clause was instituted back all the way to John Wesley. And initially, the trust clause was to say that any kind of local property of a local church actually belonged to the whole entity of Methodism. And that was to protect the local church. So, if you don't have paragraph 2553 and the church wants to leave the denomination, typically they've had to negotiate the value of their property and all of their assets to be able to leave. Paragraph 2553 says the trust clause is set aside. In other words, a church, once they meet their financial obligations of apportionments and the pension and health liabilities, they're able to leave and they don't have to buy their property. The catch on paragraph 2553 is it expires at the end of this year. In 2019, it was a great idea because they thought there would be a general conference the following year and legislation would be put forth and everybody would know what was going to happen in the life of the denomination. If it went this way, then churches who were not in agreement with that direction, they could disaffiliate. If it went this way, the others could. But there was no general conference in 2020 because of the pandemic. It was postponed to 21. And then postponed to 22. We could have had it last year, by the way, but we didn't. And they bumped it to 2024 after the expiration of paragraph 2553. So when you hear people say, well, let's just wait and see what happens at next year's general conference in 2024, the problem of that and the reason we think it's so risky is that we don't think the language will change. We think it will still keep the mandatory punishment because although most of the churches that have disaffiliated that are conservative or tend to lean that way, it's really a small number. Right now, I saw the number, I think it's up to 2,070, and there are still 28,500 remaining churches in the U.S. So most of the churches in the U.S. are still intact. However, in the central conferences, especially in the Philippines and Africa, where they are far more conservative because of culture and because they have growing numbers and higher proportion of delegates to general conference, there are no disaffiliations. And so that sector of votes who helped to put the mandatory punishment into place at 2019 will still be there in force next year. And I find it highly unlikely that they've changed their opinion on the matter. Also, we have heard, so the language is unlikely to change. Also, there's no talk, or I haven't heard any, of re-upping paragraph 2553. In fact, we've heard quite the opposite from the extreme left, from the extreme right, and even centrist churches that are remaining in the denomination are all talking about keeping everybody together and not letting other churches leave. So, at next year's general conference, we're afraid the worst case scenario is likely, that the language won't change and there will be no gracious exit available. And so we feel that the time is right to take advantage of the paragraph that was written, especially for a church like us that disagrees with the language of the Book of Discipline. We are able to use that and be the church that St. Luke's truly is. We're not a mandatory punishment church. We've never been that way. We never intend to be that way. And so words matter, and we want to be the church that everything about us reflects that grace of God. I want to end with a quote from John Wesley. He says, "Religion is the love of God and neighbor, that is, every person under heaven." Thank you.
I would like to read from the book of Matthew, starting in the 25th chapter. "Then the king will say to those at his right hand, 'Come, O blessed of my Father, when the kingdom was prepared for you. For when I was hungry, you gave me food, and when I was thirsty, you gave me drink. When I was a stranger, you welcomed me, and I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed thee, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see thee a stranger and welcome you, or naked and clothe thee? And when did we see you sick or in prison and visit thee?' And the king will answer them, 'Truly I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brethren, you did it to me.'" That DNA of St. Luke's is very much understanding what is our call and our responsibility to be in mission in the world. Tonight, we're going to be talking through here and through our questions about the issue of human sexuality, what's in the discipline, but we're also going to be talking about the state of the church. That's what we have been asked to do. What do we believe is the state of the church? And one of the things we're going to be talking about tonight is that the fact that the United Methodist Church is in serious decline and has been for years and years, since actually 1960, only picking up in speed in 2002. And so we're going to look at that and what the implications of it really are. When we notified you that the administrative board had voted 70, well, I guess the original one was, I think it was 60-1 or something like that. It was huge. And we said, this is what we're doing. We happen to make the comment, we feel it is sad that the United Methodist Church has had to cut back on its giving to missions. We then had our meeting with the bishop and people from the annual conference, and they came out and said that's not true, that really we are increasing our giving to mission. Many of you came to me and said, "Bob, we're confused. This is what y'all said. This is what they just said." So what we tried to do is you received a brochure tonight, and you may have already picked them up. I encourage you to take it home and read it. But on about the second page, we simply put together a chart for you just to be able to show this is the issue. And from in 2021 to 2023, that is true, we did raise our giving to mission by about $1,500 total. From 2014 to 2023, you can see the decrease in every single missional giving, and it is down an average 41.5% of every single missional thing. So that's reality. We've had to cut 41.5% of almost every single one. Some might be 30 some odd, some 60%, but that's what has been happening. Now, that is not because somebody suddenly became very angry and said, "Oh, we're not going to want to help people." Of course not. That's not who we are. That's not who we are in the United Methodist Church. The issue is fewer people, less money. They're having to do this because there are fewer people and there is less money, so they are cutting back on mission. So that's simply the point that we were trying to make, not that people were doing mean things or bad things. It simply coincides with the reality that the church is shrinking. However, that is not true at St. Luke's. At St. Luke's, we have been growing. And because there is more people, they are giving more. And because you are giving more, we are doing more. Because we understand that DNA, whenever you do it to the least of these, you do it to me. And so I wanted you to have a sense of pride and understanding what we as a family of faith are doing. When we look at someplace like Neighborhood Services Organization, also known as NSO. NSO is one of these organizations. Back in 2014, they received $22,000 in apportionments from the entire annual conference. It is now down to $10,750. That's an incredible organization in downtown Oklahoma City that is extremely effective in serving the needs of the least of these. So that's what the total used to be, $22,000 down to $10,750. We believe in NSO, so what we've been giving is $25,000. Our apportionment is about $560. That's what's asked out of us to give to NSO, about $560. We gave $25,000 in each of the last 3 years, and we let them host their fundraising, which will be coming up in April this year, and we use our communication teams to create all their materials, and we provide the meal and the chef, another $15,000 to $20,000 in kind for them. We're doing the same sort of things for Lydia Patterson Institute, the wonderful school down on the border. Our apportionment is a little over $3,000. What we wind up giving has been averaging over $20,000 each of the last 3 years. So you, because of your generosity, because we have been growing, have been increasing in what you've been doing in the community. Why don't you roll for us, Brent, the many different organizations that you have been supporting? These are the missions. There's several slides of it, of each one, the last 3 years that we have been helping to fund at the rate of about $300,000 a year is what we have been spending on these organizations. That is St. Luke's giving $300,000 to these organizations. That is correct. However, because of the pandemic, as you know, we had one of the great crises arise in hunger in our city, with so many people losing their jobs, so many people being in the society of the least of these, who suddenly were not being able to work, who were suddenly going hungry. And you remember we were asked by OG&E, could we help partner with them and figure out how to create a program of buying food from restaurants and then turning around and giving it away to those who suddenly had lost their jobs. And that was the impetus that got us going. And with all of that, and we had Oklahoma County come to us and say, would you take over Meals on Wheels? And so suddenly we're overseeing lots of organizations, but just us and what we were going to give skyrocketed. We used to have a budget of about $10,000 a year. And we did a wonderful ministry every Saturday for about 100 families for more than 30 years. And we were kind of known as the Ritz-Carlton of mobile meals. We never had a meal go out that I didn't want to eat. I mean, we did well. But suddenly we were asked, will you take over the entire county? Will you take on all these responsibilities? And it happened at a time when it skyrocketed the needs. And so with mobile meals and then this, what we now call community market, for the last 3 years, we have spent over $1 million a year feeding the hungry. That's incredible. That was not in the budget. We were able to do it because we have partnered with business, OG&E, BOK, Paycom. We have partnered with government, Oklahoma City County Health Department. We've done it with nonprofits, the food pantry. But the key, we've done grants, but the key has been you and your giving. And so we have been spending between 1.4 and 1.5 million just St. Luke's to bless these missions, from all the ones you saw going by to what's actually going on with our food ministry. So I just wanted to take a moment to say, to understand our commitment to mission on the broader level in a world where the need is growing, where the United Methodist Church has been having to do less, and you've been stepping up to do more. When the conference came out to make a presentation, they came out and they began to talk about the fact that we were not, quote, paying our apportionments. Now, if you're not United Methodist, you may not understand what they were saying. Apportionments is how the annual conference and the general conference, the higher United Methodist Church, gets its money to fund itself. They take a budget, nice pie, take a budget, and then they will say, let's cut out a portion of that and give it to this church, and a portion of it and give it to that church. It is apportioned out to churches based on your size, your wealth, what you spend. They give different varying amounts of the budget to different churches to be able to pay. One of the fascinating things when this was brought up, and many of you asked me about it, so how come we're not always paying all of our apportionments? For 24 years, when I was senior pastor, for 24 years in a row, we paid 100%. You don't just wake up one day and decide, I don't think we want to do that anymore. There are reasons. The issue is we dealt with this on our finance committee. So your finance committee, duly elected, dealt with this and how we're going to be fiscally responsible. And we didn't come talk about it to the whole church because we had no desire to be talking about very difficult things that are going on at the annual conference. We had our finance committee deal with it. That's why we have a finance committee. And they made the decision, as we were going along, we would not pay 100%. But since we have been pushed on this, we wanted to talk to you about why we did not pay our apportionments in full. In 2016, as Wendy said, when we started talking about this issue of human sexuality, disaffiliation, and what was going on, we went to General Conference. I was a delegate to Portland, where the General Conference, the United Methodist Church, was meeting, and it had to be one of the worst experiences as a church gathering that I've ever been to. It was so dysfunctional. It was so mean-spirited. We've been fighting over this issue since 1972. And in 2016, it got so bad that you have the far left who began protesting against the bishop who was seating in the chair to lead the meeting and doing so many Robert Rules of Orders that they got him so twisted, so tied up, then demanded he be removed from the chair, and finally you had reduced this bishop to tears while trying to lead the General Conference. And because he then was going to be removed from the chair, and it was the left who was doing it, the right jumped up, mainly our delegates from Central Conference, who jumped up and began to parade around through the auditorium, singing, chanting. Everything had to come to a stop. And I was sitting there on the floor with another delegate, and I said, we just crossed a line. This is anarchy. We will never be the same. So the fight went on, and it's like we're going to split, and they're starting to make proposals, and we came right up to the edge, and finally a proposal was made that said, bishops, why don't you bring a plan back and help us figure out a way forward? And so by a very narrow vote, we decided to table the issue and say, give the bishops a chance, hopefully within 2 years, to come back and show us a way forward. When we came home from the 2016 Annual General Conference, it was clear the United Methodist Church was ultimately going to split. You had general agencies that were now putting away money for that rainy day. And as an and as a church, we said, we don't want to fund the general church until we know what's going to happen. Why are we funding Church and Society, Board of Discipleship, the printing? Listen, we're not going to fund this until we see what's going to happen. So in 2016, we said we won't pay our general church apportionments. So again, that's not all of it by any means, maybe 20%, something like that, 25%. That's what we did not pay, and that is why, because of what was going on in the general church and what went on at General Conference. So then in 2017, we did not pay because we expected we have to wait till 2018. But in 2017, something else started to happen in the annual conference. Wendy was sitting with our conference finance and administration, the committee that oversees finances for all of the annual conference, and they couldn't get reports. They weren't getting numbers. Josh was sitting on our New Faith communities. They could not get reports and good numbers. I was sitting on the Board of Pensions and Health Benefits. We were not getting good numbers and reports. We had red flags going up and thinking, we've got a problem here. What is going on? It was in 2018. We did not have the next General Conference. We're really good at postponing General Conference in the Methodist Church. We didn't have it in 2018. It got pushed off to 2019. But in 2018, when they came out with the audit for the Oklahoma Annual Conference, the audit for the conference said the Oklahoma Annual Conference did not properly record $1.36 million in contributions, did not properly reconcile, balance, and review investment accounts, and did not properly reconcile and review post-retirement benefits. Wow, we knew something had been wrong. In 2018, when that audit came out of 2017 and 2018, we still couldn't get financial reports on all the committees we were sitting on, raising our concern even more. 2019 annual conference came. According to the discipline, the law of the church is you must generate an audit of the previous year by annual conference every year. Annual conference is in June. We went to annual conference in 2019 and did not receive an audit for 2018. It could not be produced. So when that happened, our finance committee got together and said, if an organization that we're giving money to cannot produce an audit, then we will not give money to them. That seems fiscally irresponsible. And so that's why we then took a significant step in not paying apportionments because an audit could not be produced. It was also in 2019 that we suddenly came to the fall and were told this self-insurance program we had for ministers was seriously underwater. It was in financial trouble, and we needed now all the churches to come up with extra money, and we needed all the ministers to have to increase their premiums. Sitting on that committee, I was raising questions saying, are we sure we're dealing with good numbers? Can we trust the numbers that are being given to us? We would later find out, absolutely not. But we were told, yes, we changed the program, the health insurance program for ministers. In order to pay the extra money, it would cost St. Luke's $50,000 more to be a part of the new program. We said, we're not doing it. We have our own insurance program because we have hundreds of employees. We're going to put the ministers on our own program, and they came and begged us and said, please don't do that. We think this will all collapse if you don't participate. So we chose to participate, costing $50,000 that we could have been spending on food ministry and other things, and instead we were spending it on health insurance for ministers because that's what had to be for the conference. It cost all of us more money individually. 2020 came, and now we couldn't receive an audit for 2019 either. We didn't receive an audit for 2018. We didn't receive an audit for 2019. There is a reason we stopped paying apportionments. And what we found was money that we were sending in, money that was we sent in for Project Transformation. It's a reading program in the summer. We got a call in December saying, we have some money here. We think it was from St. Luke's. Where was it supposed to go? The United Methodist Women had bake sales and raised money for New Day Camp, which is a camp for the children of prisoners. They sent the money we sent the money into the conference for them. And then we got a call in December saying, we have some other money here. Where was it supposed to go? We soon discovered that there were many instances where we were sending money and it was not getting to the people it's supposed to get to. Finally, in 2021, it came out that we had not been balancing the books. We had not been reconciling the books on a monthly basis for 2 years. So we had no idea what kind of money we had or where it was going. It was in 2021 that we finally, I guess it was actually 2021, that we finally brought in Randy Compton and his firm to start trying to build the books back and put it together. He thought it'd take maybe 3 months. It took almost a year. The auditors were having such a hard time reconciling 1 year to the next year, and where do you start? What I'm happy to say to you is there is no evidence of fraud or people taking money. It was good people who were in over their heads that did not know what they were doing. And so things just got messed up terribly. And so they had to come in and finally draw a line in the dirt and start rebuilding accounts with thinking how much goes to this one, how much goes to that one, and where are we? The financial recording and aspect of the annual conference was truly an incredible mess. So when they finally were able to produce an audit for 2018 and 2019, which they did with so many what are called exceptions, it's all the complaints and the things that were wrong, but they came back and said to us, would you pay the 5-starred items for 2019 and 2020? 5-starred items are apportionments, and these are items we all agree to pay, and those items were the Episcopal Fund, the District Superintendent Fund, the Retiree Medical Fund, the Equitable Comp Fund, and Ministers Moving Fund. Those are the 5-starred items, and so we did pay those items as was requested of us. It is true. The Finance Committee made the decision, we're not going to pay for a while. And there was a reason. Everything from what was going on in the General Conference in the United Methodist Church to what was going on for the record keeping in the books of the Oklahoma Annual Conference. There was a reason. During that time that we were not doing that, it's not because we wanted to keep money. That's when we started giving more money away than ever before. Instead of sending $563 to NSO, we gave them $25,000 plus another $20,000, and we're doing that for all the different ministries down the line, increasing our missional giving over what was being asked out of us significantly, because we do believe when you do it unto the least of these, you do it unto me. We were increasing our mission of what we were doing for one another. And I'm so very proud of us as a family of faith for being committed to being good stewards, fiscally responsible, and caring more than ever before in such a very difficult time.
I'd like to read from Matthew's Gospel in chapter 28. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I'm with you always to the end of the age. It's what's known as the Great Commission. It was one of the final commandments that Jesus gave to his disciples before he ascended into heaven. To go into all nations, spreading that good news of hope, that gospel message of God's love. For nearly 134 years now, that has been our commitment at St. Luke's, to be sharing Christ and to be living out the Great Commission. That's why we came together as a family of faith on that first Sunday after the land run back in 1889 to call people together for a worship service. Because we knew that even in those earliest days, as pioneers were coming on the frontier and trying to establish their homes and their new lives, everybody needed to have a church home. People needed to come together for worship. And we still believe so strongly in that today. That's why we have such a strong commitment to sharing Christ, because we believe that everybody needs to have a church home, a family of faith to come and worship with. It's what we've been doing now for 134 years, and it's that commitment that has led us to consistently be named one of the top 10 fastest growing Methodist churches in all of America. But it's because we are so committed to that and because we are so passionate about that it makes us so sad to see the decline that is going on within our denomination. If you were to look at the years 2009 to 2019, in that 10-year stretch, what you would see is here in the Oklahoma Annual Conference, there has been more than a 21% decline in average Sunday worship attendance. In that 10-year stretch, we lost more than 12,000 people worshiping with us on average on Sunday mornings. If you were to look across the entire United States in the United Methodist Church, you would see that in that same 10-year period, it was a decline of more than 24%. Now, what we saw during that time is that it wasn't just a steady, even decline over the years. The decline was actually picking up steam as time went along. It was Dr. Don House, who is a professional economist, who was chairing the GCFNA, that's the General Council on Finance and Administration, kind of the finance committee for the global denomination. He was the chair of their Economic Advisory Committee. Dr. Don House does economic projections for-profit companies, nonprofit industries, all over the world, and he is incredible at what he does. Well, as he was chairing this committee on economic advisory, they asked him to do some economic projections for the United Methodist Church back in 2016. He started running his projections, and I want to read to you just a portion of what he said in his report. He said, between 1974 and 2002, we lost an average of 4,720 in worship attendance per year. But a major shift occurred in 2002. The rate skyrocketed to an annual rate of 52,383 between 2002 and 2012. And now we've seen losses of 62,571, 75,671, and 82,313 between 2014 and 2015. This is not sustainable. That was what Dr. Don House found as he started looking at all of the different numbers. What was the trajectory of our denomination? Here in Oklahoma, in our annual conference, we saw these trends. We knew that there was decline happening, and so we tried to do something about it. The annual conference tried to do something about this. In fact, the annual conference budgeted nearly $7 million during that 10-year period from 2009 to 2019 to help start new churches and to revitalize existing churches. That is, to help existing churches grow again. So we budgeted nearly $7 million of apportioned funds to starting new churches and revitalizing churches. And what did that $7 million get us? At the end of that 10 years, we had 9.5% fewer churches here in Oklahoma. We had 12.2% fewer church members. We had 21.5% fewer people attending church in Oklahoma. And 43.7% fewer people were being baptized. So after budgeting nearly $7 million of apportioned funds, what we saw was just decline across the board. Well, as I said, all of that was from 2009 to 2019. But then you think about what's happened over the last 3 years now. 2020, we all know the pandemic hit. After living through a couple of years of that and now going through disaffiliation within our denomination, what will the Methodist Church look like today in 2023? Is there any reason to believe that these numbers have been reversed because of COVID or because of disaffiliations? But what we've been saying here at St. Luke's is it's not just about what's happening in this moment, but it's about what will the church look like 10 years from now. I think about my daughter Lucy. She's 3 years old right now. What is the church going to look like 10 years from now for her as she's growing up in the church? As we look ahead 10 years down the road, in 2032, it's easy to see that the church here in Oklahoma, the United Methodist Church, could be 70 to 80% less than what we were back in 2009. Now, I want to be clear, this isn't just about the United Methodist Church. This is happening in mainline denominations all across the United States. It's the secularization of America. This is going on all over the place. But I also want to be clear that there is a difference between what is happening at the denominational level and what is happening in local churches. Because not all local churches are in decline. There are many local churches here in Oklahoma and across the United States that are thriving, that are booming and growing and doing so well. And the good news is, you're a part of one of those churches. St. Luke's has consistently been named one of the top 10 fastest growing Methodist churches for the last decade. And I think that puts us in a unique position, because we are a growing church, to be able to envision something new for Methodism, a new chapter for Methodism, a new beginning. We value being Methodist here at St. Luke's. We value our Methodist theology that is based on John Wesley's prevenient, justifying, and sanctifying grace. We value being connected with others in mission and ministry to the world because we believe that we can do more together than we can on our own, and we desire to still be a part of the Methodist movement. All of that has led us to this place of creating the Wesley Methodist Society. You know, for 100 years now, St. Luke's has been seen as a leader within Methodism. We've been the church that so many others have looked to for inspiration and ideas and leadership and guidance and vision. As we've been going through the pandemic, as we've been going through disaffiliation, so many other pastors and churches have been looking to St. Luke's and saying, what do you all see as the future? Where can we go? What can we do that is new in Methodism? And as other pastors and churches have been coming to us and talking to us, we've been getting together with them and talking about what could a new version of Methodism begin to look like? What could it look like if we created this Wesley Methodist Society that would provide us a way to still be connected with others in mission and ministry without having to have all of the overhead of a large bureaucracy? What would it look like to be able to create something that would allow us to maintain our connection with all of these Methodist missions that are so near and dear to our hearts? Things like NSO and Lydia Patterson and Skyline and Circle of Care that are doing such incredible things in our community. And yet we still want to be able to have the freedom to follow the Holy Spirit and to live out the Great Commission and win new people to Christ. You know, by being part of the Wesley Methodist Society, we will still be called St. Luke's Methodist Church. We will still be connected to the history of Methodism going all the way back to John Wesley, who, when he was starting the Methodist movement, he started these class meetings. These class meetings were small groups of people coming to grow in their faith. And they would form together with others to make these united societies. And the united societies would live out the mission of the church. They would reach out to the least and the last and the lost. They would be there to win new people to Christ and to bring people into relationship with God. It was the societies that really helped to live out the Great Commission in the early Methodist movement. And for 134 years now at St. Luke's, we've been helping people to share Christ. We've been helping people to grow in their faith. We've been helping to serve the community in so many different ways. And that's what we're going to continue to do for another 134 years. You heard Wendy earlier talking about paragraph 2553 and the harsh language in our book of discipline. I do disagree with that language that's in our discipline because it doesn't reflect the grace of God. Mandatory punishments, that's not why Jesus came. Jesus came so that we wouldn't have to have mandatory punishment anymore, and I do thank God for that. And so because I disagree with the language of the book of discipline, I'm going to be voting yes for disaffiliation this Sunday. And I invite you to join with me in voting yes. But in doing so, I'm actually excited about the future possibilities. I'm excited about being a part of a new version of Methodism, a new chapter for Methodism, a new vision for who we can be as Methodists. I'm excited about being a part of the Wesley Methodist Society and being a part of a family of faith that for 134 more years to come will be committed to sharing God's love and bringing hope in this world.
It was 32 years ago, this June, that I first got to come up to St. Luke's. What an incredible gift that was. And I have to tell you, the leadership of this church has never been afraid to confront reality and want to do something about it. When I came 32 years ago, we started trying to look at the church, and we were in a serious decline. We had been declining for the last 20 years. And so we got together and started asking questions. I'll never forget, the first one was, so what is our attendance? After the first Sunday when I was here, I went to the ushers, how many do we have in church today? And they said, well, we didn't count. And I said, okay, next week, would you count? And they said, okay. So the next week, I came out and said, how many do we have? 737. Great, thank you. Third week, I came out and I said, so how many do we have today? And they said, you mean every week you want us to count? Yes, every week I want you to count. Because we need to know, how is our trend? Face reality. And I can tell you what the trend was for the next 2 years. We continued to tick down. I had never served a church that had ticked down. That made my heart stop. The bishop had said, it'll probably take you 6 years to try to turn the church. Well, the first 2, he was exactly right. It was tick down, it was a tick down. Third year, we had a tick up. And everyone was excited, and I went, no, we don't have victory yet. Fourth year, there was a tick up. Fifth year, there was a tick up. We have ticked up now for the last 30 years in a row. But it was the leaders of this church who are willing to say, let's look at the reality. And we started trying to say, how many first-time guests are we having a Sunday? There were many Sundays we had 0 first-time guests. We found out we were averaging 0 to 4 first-time guests a Sunday. And so I started trying to draw a chart, and I'm going, okay, how many people do we have dying? How many are we losing per year? How many new people are we going to have joining? We started drawing the lines, and it wasn't all that long until we said someone's going to have to draw straws and turn out the lights. It was easy to see the future. And so the church all said, what are we going to do about it? We confronted reality. I had a 2-week Sunday school program. I ran all around every single week. We only had 2 services then, so I could preach, teach, preach. And I started going to class saying, do you understand? We're dead. If we don't do something, it's over. And so we ran around. I put on my listening ears, and so many people were saying, we need to go on television. Other people saying, we need a midweek program. And I looked around and said, we don't have a time to make the wrong decision, so we're going to go on TV and create a midweek program. And that's why we created Wednesday Night Alive 30 years ago. It's why we got on television so many years ago. And then we'd do radio. And what we found was first-time guests started going up dramatically, and people started joining the church, and we started creating all kinds of new programming and new missions, and the church started growing because the leadership of this church was willing to say, let's look at the facts. Now, what do we need to do to start trying to deal with this? It's actually called the Stockdale Paradox. I didn't know it at that time when we were doing this, but if you've read the business book Good to Great years ago, it actually is what they talk about is the Stockdale Paradox. I won't go through all the story of how it comes about, but the bottom line is, it says, are you willing to confront the most brutal facts of the current reality and have an undying faith that you'll be successful? And that's what St. Luke's was willing to do 32 years ago. What are the most brutal facts of the current reality? And we had an undying faith that God wanted to use us in a wonderful way to make a difference in this world. And so we tried some things that did not work. I can make that list out for you, but we're willing to try and keep looking at the facts. And so we have grown. What I say to you is most organizations don't want to do that, and the United Methodist Church has not wanted to do that. It pains me to say that, but the United Methodist Church has not wanted to face the most brutal facts of the current reality. When I've gone as a delegate to General Conference for years and years now, we do not talk about a church in decline. We will talk about fossil-free UMC. We will talk about the Palestinians and the Jews and what do we need to do. We will talk about homosexuality. We talk about a lot of things, but we don't talk about we're dying. And what are we going to do about it? And because we have not done that, we have gone into such serious decline. You may have been reading letters in the newspaper and all kinds of places recently where people are saying, we still believe there's a great future and things are going to get better. Why? What are we doing different? I cannot tell you how many of my colleagues are angry at me. Angry at me because we've talked the facts. It makes people mad. They go, Bob, you're not saying nice things. No, we're saying reality. It doesn't make me happy. I don't do it out of spite. I don't do it out of anger. The issue is, if you don't face the most brutal facts of the current reality, you're not going to change your reality. Back in 1986, Bishop Richard Wilkie came out with a book, And Are We Yet Alive? It's part of a song. I love the song. We would sing it at an annual conference. You kind of come back together, and are we yet alive? We still got to see each other's face again after this last year. I loved that camaraderie. But he wrote the book, and what the book said was, as a Methodist church, we're dying. He went back to 1960. The Methodist Church was dying in 1960, and so was the Evangelical United Brethren Church, the EUB Church. And so what we decided was, why don't we get the dying EUBs and the dying Methodists together, and we'll have a growing congregation. That program didn't work. And so we merged in 1968. That's how we became the United Methodist Church. And so we merged in 1968. Bishop Wilkie traced it to 1960 to 1986, and he said, Methodist brothers and sisters, we are in trouble. He looked at the brutal facts of the current reality, and then he said, and here's what we need to do to turn the world around. And how did the bishops respond to Bishop Wilkie? They took him off every board he was serving on, every opportunity he had as an Episcopal leader on an international level, and basically ostracized him. And so what did Bishop Wilkie do? He went home and wrote Disciple Bible Study. Disciple Bible Study has been one of the best things to come along in the Methodist Church in the last 40 years and has blessed so many thousands upon thousands of lives. And if you've taken Disciple Bible Study, or you're taking the new shorter time Disciple Bible Study by his daughter and son-in-law now, it's because Bishop Wilkie was willing to face the most brutal facts of the current reality, was ostracized because of it, and then did something with that opportunity that truly is blessing life. So we continued to go along, losing. And Lyle Schaller is kind of the guru of church growth. If you had to go to seminary or you've been wanting to learn about churches, you'll have read Lyle Schaller. And Lyle Schaller in 2004 came out with a book, The Ice Cube is Melting. And again, what he said was, here are the facts, and we're in trouble. And here's what we need to do. We can turn the corner. We can make this work. When the book came out, our bishop at that time here in Oklahoma stood up and talked about how bad the book was, trashed it, and basically said, I don't want to see anybody reading it. We didn't want to hear the most brutal facts of the current reality. And so we again ignored it. We continued to move along. In 2018, you've already heard about our General Conference on Finance and Administration. They came out with a study in 2018, and it was reflecting over the last 8 years, going back to 2010 to 2018. They had 5 bishops, 5 lay people, and 5 clergy from across the United States. And they came up with what they called an honest description of our current reality. And I'm going to take a moment to read just a little bit to you. It should be on the screen too. We foresee a day coming soon when a local church will sacrifice its own health if we continue to apportion dollars as we do now. The sustained health of the connection is dependent on the sustained health of the local churches, so we need to ensure that our churches have resources for making disciples. We need to shift from a system based on what the local church can bear to a system that empowers the local churches to make disciples. In the near future, and based on the current facts listed below, there will be a dramatically different church leading to a precipitous decline in the apportionment dollars available to the connection because of the facts of 27% decline in professions of faith in the last 8 years, 15% decline in average worship attendance in the last 8 years, 10% decline in membership in the last 8 years, closed churches accelerating and outnumbering new churches nearly 3-to-1 in the last 5 years. That number has gotten far worse. The average age of United Methodist is 57. In the last 5 years, we've all gotten older, which is tied for the second oldest religious institution in the United States. Larger churches carrying a larger part of the financial burden, some of which are in the best position to achieve the church's mission in their own context. That's what the commission, our General Conference on Finance and Administration, their honest description of the current reality. To confront the most brutal facts of the current reality and to have an undying faith will be successful. Paul says, I can do all things through Jesus Christ who strengthens me. There is a need for the gospel in the world today. Churches can grow, and I can point to them all over the United States that are growing, and yet so many are not. And we are seeing the secularization of America, and it's so very, very unfortunate. One of the things that we're seeing, the problem at this moment is General Conference, in my opinion. You've heard us talk about that several times tonight. General Conference is where every annual conference sends delegates from around the world. From around the world. And we all get together, and we do not have a president or a bishop of everyone or a pope. We don't have anybody in charge. We have 865 people who will come from around the world, and every one of us knows that we are in charge. And we show up, and we feel like there's things we need to do, and we start getting in these committees and trying to pass legislation, and it is chaos. And I can tell you the times that I've sat there and worked for 2 weeks with people to try to pass legislation that was going to be real change for the church, and we got it all done, and someone said, I'd like to appeal to the Judicial Council, which is the Supreme Court, if this is constitutional. And they came back and threw out everything we'd accomplished that week, every single thing that got passed that could have had an impact on the church. And people do that every general conference. I appeal to the Judicial Council, and I can't tell you how much legislation gets thrown out every time we try to change. Our system of how we're trying to govern ourselves was put up at the same time as our United States Constitution. 1784, our Christmas conference in Baltimore. So that's why we have our bishops, our executive, and yet we won't let them speak or lead at General Conference, and then a legislative body, and then a judicial council. It is just like what we tried to set up here in America. I'm not sure how well it's working for us either here in the United States, but let me tell you, it's not working in the United Methodist Church. And to believe that our General Conference is going to lead us out of this quagmire, I think is just, it's not going to happen. The fact that we're having to meet tonight to wrestle with this issue of what's in the discipline is because of General Conference. There is no leadership. They put together a horrible program, And now every church is having to wrestle with this issue rather than it being decided, and here's how we're going to go forward as a denomination. Now every church has to deal with it, and we're tearing up every single church across America that's United Methodist. Thank you, General Conference. I despise this program. I despise that we have to be doing this right now. I despise the language and the discipline. And my greatest fear is that we're going to go to General Conference in 2024, and then 2028 and 2032, and the amount of delegates from the United States is going down. The amount of delegates coming from the central conferences are going up. And I'm thrilled, never miss this, I'm thrilled that we are growing in the Philippines and in Africa, and we should do everything we can to support that growth. But we come from different cultures. The culture in Africa, you cannot discuss homosexuality. That is a crime. So they're going to be bringing one vision to it. And people are bringing a different vision from the United States, and they have clashed. And we're about to be stuck in a dying denomination that can't find its way forward, where we will no longer actually be in control. The amount of delegates from outside the United States will be far greater than those inside the United States. And we'll be stuck with a discipline, with language that we don't agree with. And there will not be paragraph 2553 that allows you to leave a gracious exit. When that ends in December this year, I do not expect it to ever show up again. The far left does not want it. The far right does not want it. We will be here to the end. Or we can find a way forward, still being Methodist. As I have said to the bishop and to our annual conference, I want us to be cousins. I want to walk hand in hand. We don't want to walk away from the annual conference. We will support every single United Methodist mission that we've been supporting. I love those missions. I've worked 50 years in the United Methodist Church to try to build these kinds of missions. I don't want to walk away from them. We don't want to burn the house down. In April, we're going to be hosting NSO's fundraising program, and we may not be a part of the United Methodist Church anymore. We'll be hosting it, giving them the same money. In May, we're going to be hosting Skyline, the food ministry arm of the United Methodist Church. They're going to be using the facility, and we'll be hosting them and giving them money in May. I have said to the bishop in the conference in our DS this morning, let me know if there's projects we can work together on. Is it the homeless issue? Is it how to help the rural churches? We don't want to walk away, but we don't want to be stuck in a place where we do not agree with the theology that is going to be continuing to decline, that, as the General Conference has said, is going to need more and more money from the few growing churches. This coming June, I'll be completing 50 years as a Methodist minister. Started when I was 19. And if you would have told me that on that 50th year I would be voting to disaffiliate from the United Methodist Church, I would have said there's no way that'll ever happen. Marsh and I, we've talked about it, we've cried about it. We are sentimental about the past. We love our heritage and our past. We used to work the snack bar when we were in youth at First Methodist Church, where we grew up, for annual conference. So many good memories. But the past is done. What are the most brutal facts of the current reality? That's a nostalgia that we love and will always be grateful for, but it's not where we are in the world today. And so we believe the path forward. We will be voting to disaffiliate. And you know something? Every ending is also a beginning. Every ending is a beginning. And this can be an exciting time for us to start dreaming so many new dreams. And I can tell you they're already in the pipeline. We've already made an initial trip to Kenya, and we're looking at a mission at Kisumu, Kenya. We went there right before the pandemic. Well, we're going to be going back. We have new things coming out with virtual reality, teaching our children the Bible stories with virtual reality. I'm telling you, there are so many exciting things that I can hardly wait to start talking about again and stop talking about this, and that will start after Sunday. We have an exciting future and exciting things we're going to be doing together. We will expand how we're going to share God's love and bring hope in the world. And I hope to get to do that with you. Let me just say one last thing and we'll take questions. You know, we're a family of faith. And that means in a family of faith, you can have differences of opinion. At least in our family, we have differences of opinion. Marcia's always trying to convince me that I'm not quite right. We'll have a difference of opinion. But it doesn't mean you don't love each other. Or you don't stay married. And so I'm going through this process, and I just have to tell you, I'm not going through it angry. And if you think differently from me, that's okay. I will still love you. I will not be angry with you. And I hope you don't have to feel you have to be angry at me. We can think different and still love each other. I think that's how it's supposed to work. John Wesley said, though we do not think alike, can we not love alike? So we're going to come to Sunday, and we're going to take this vote. And if it doesn't pass, then I hope I get to continue to be your pastor for the next 3 years till I have mandatory retirement. At the same time, if it does pass, I don't know how long I'll be your pastor. So, but if it does pass, we're going to embark on some exciting new things. And it'll be fun. So whichever way we go, we don't have to be angry with each other. It's about making a decision as a family of faith. And we will never agree on all things. So I hope we can vote. We will receive the results. And there shouldn't have to be winners and losers. What we're doing is trying to find out where the St. Luke's family wants to go. So we don't win, we don't lose. We simply find out where we, as a family, wants to go. And we will do that. With grace and with God's guidance, we will then go into the future. And if you have loved your church and enjoyed your church in the past, it's going to be that same church that's going forward into the future. So, we should have cards to pass out if you want to have questions. And I don't know, Dave's got some cards and Steve's got cards. I'll tell you, you don't have to ask questions. You may ask questions, and we are more than happy to be here as long as you would like us to be to answer them. They'll pass them out. You can write them down. We'll pick them up. If you have heard enough and feel your questions are answered or you have other things going on, please feel free to get up and to leave, and no one's going to think anything strange about it, and I will not think, oh my gosh, they're all mad at me. So please, just, if you've got a question, great, we'll answer them. If not, then feel free to. Do what? Absolutely. Get one of the cards and write it down. Jeff is here in the front as well. And we have pens.
Do you want to explain voting while they're doing that?
Why don't you do that? My voice is running out.
Okay.
Sorry.
During this time, we've had singing going on, and I won't be doing that. But I will tell you.
I will.
Absolutely, that would be great. But I'll tell you about the ballots on Sunday. We don't have an exact copy of the ballot. We will receive that on Sunday, but we do know it will have 3 options: yes, no, and abstain. This, we believe it will look something in this form. So this is not a vote on gay marriage. This is a vote on disaffiliation. So if you're in favor, yes. If you're against, no. Now, one of the things that's really important to understand for the motion to carry, for the church to disaffiliate, we need 66.7% or above yes votes of total ballots distributed. So it means that if you vote no, or if you abstain, or if you have an invalid ballot, or if you don't return your ballot, all of those are counted against yes votes. So they count however many ballots are distributed, and then the yes, in order for the motion to pass, have to be 66.7% of the total ballots distributed. The person that's coming from the district that's in charge of kind of the tellers and the volunteers from the district side, her name is Shiloh O'Neill. She's the pastor at First Moore, wonderful person. And she happens to work on the election board. And so she's going to observe the rules from a county election board. And so one of the things she said is, if we find a blank ballot, we can turn that back in and write the notes that this was not cast, and it will go back into the pot and won't be counted against the yeses. So if you find a ballot that somebody accidentally dropped, or if you have an invalid ballot, please bring it to Shiloh or myself or one of us, and we can write the necessary documentation on it and put it back so that it isn't counted against the total vote of yeses. So that's an important thing, and you need to know that. Also, when you come, registration, we had asked for kind of a longer period of registration, but registration will only be at the downtown campus. It will take place in the Christian Life Center from 12 to 2. You need a picture ID. Please don't forget it. They'll be looking for your name on the picture ID, your face, and the name on the membership list that we have. I will tell you in advance that the membership list, because of the information they wanted on it, is really, really tiny. And so we're going to try to have bright lights at the tables. If you need to bring extra power glasses with you, you can do that, but the lines will be teeny tiny, and we'll go through the registration. It'll be separated out in the Christian Life Center, so you'll look around the room and find the first letter of your last name, and it'll go fairly quickly because we'll have many stations. You will receive a wristband, which is your ticket to enter one of the voting areas. Once you come in, Dr. Victor McCullough, our DS, will start the meeting. He'll have a few comments just to explain why everyone is there. And then he'll invite Darcy Shine to make the motion. She is the chairperson of Ad Board. She'll make the motion and speak to it. There's the opportunity for 2 additional speeches for and 3 speeches against. Sometimes everybody's heard what they want. There's no need for speeches, and many churches, there haven't been any speeches at all. But that would be the max. 2 additional speeches for, 3 against, and those would be 2 minutes each. And Brent is going to be at the back, and he has control of the microphone if they go over 2 minutes. He's going to cut that off. So after that, the district superintendent will call for the ballots to be distributed, and they'll be passed down the rows, and everybody will have a chance to vote. And then, like communion, once everybody's done voting, everybody will kind of be ushered and told row by row when to come forward and place their ballot in one of the baskets along the altar rail or up there. If anybody has just needs assistance with that, there'll be plenty of people around to help. So if you see somebody that needs help, please notify one of us so that we can bring a basket to them. They don't have to get out of their seat and do anything that's more strenuous for them. So yes is a vote to disaffiliate, and no is a vote really to stay with the United Methodist denomination. And the reason we are voting is, again, St. Luke's takes the language of the Book of Discipline very seriously, and the language of mandatory punishment doesn't reflect the grace of God. And that is so important for us that we can't imagine staying with an organization that has that kind of wording as part of it. Yes is for disaffiliation, no is against it. Abstain actually makes me a little crazy because to abstain from voting is not to vote. But they have that on the ballot to vote abstain, which always makes me crazy. But so if you vote no, if you abstain, if you don't hand your ballot back in, or if you mess your ballot up, all of those are considered no votes. In fact, when you're handed a ballot, because it's the total of distributed ballots, every single ballot that's distributed is a no vote until you mark yes, is a great way to think about it.
All right, just some very quick. We'll try to be moving through them. Obviously, someone took my comment seriously. Dr. Long, is it true that the conference rules will require you to retire in 3 years? The answer is yes. You have mandatory retirement at 72 years old. I am 69. If we disaffiliate, do you plan to retire in 3 years? The answer is no. Can we see a sample ballot? I asked for that today, and it was refused. Will we be a sample, yes or no, disaffiliate? I think you saw a sample ballot that we had up here a second ago. I think it will be something close to looking like that. So it's very important to understand the issue of if you don't feel like voting, don't come. You don't you don't have to come. I personally wouldn't spend that time on a Sunday afternoon if you don't want to vote. So if you come and abstain, you just voted no. And that's not what you, I think, would probably mean. So it's okay. Does the Wesley Methodist Society already exist? It is, a lot of preliminary work has been done, but we felt it would be not appropriate to start the Wesley Methodist Society until churches have made the decision to disaffiliate. And so once that happens, then it'll officially come into being. But it's also something that is going to evolve over the next 4 or 5 years. I mean, it's one of those kind of things. It'll never be, it's never supposed to be the United Methodist Church size. It really is a loose affiliation of churches that want to be in ministry and mission and hold each other accountable to do the right things. So it'll provide fellowship, encouragement, accountability, and mission and ministry. And so that'll be able to evolve because it'll never be an organization that has a trust clause and it's owning property and has apportionments. It'll never have any of those kind of things. Who created the denomination of Wesley Methodist Society? That there is a number of people who came to St. Luke's saying, we're going to disaffiliate. Could you do something to help us find a place to be? So we are significantly in the creation of it. Is that indeed St. Luke's congregation will go? The answer to that one actually is a great question. No. It's the kind of thing that our executive lay leadership team will survey all the horizon and make a recommendation to our administrative board, but that will be coming, again, over a period of time. We're not going to rush into anything we don't need to. But we do have to The way, again, that the Methodist Church has set it up, you can't leave one and already be in another. They're making every church be independent in the beginning, and then you can choose. And so that's what we'll be doing. We will choose, but certainly the Wesley Methodist Society would make good sense. Will we be independent as a church, become part of a larger independent of holy churches in Oklahoma? I just answered that question. People I'm hearing seem to think this is all about money. How do you answer that? The people who say it's all about money want our money. I'm sorry. That's the reality. And so it is not all about money. We spend more money giving away than we did when we just did apportionments, by about 3 times. We are giving away more than ever before, so it's not about the money. It's about mission. And those who are hollering the loudest always seem to be those who are going to be benefiting from the apportionments that we would be paying.
I've got a few questions here. Several of these are all related together, so I'll try to read through these because there's kind of the same answer for all of them. I've heard/read from several sources that state and regional conferences may present problems or potential lawsuits if St. Luke's disaffiliates. Is this a real concern or just opposition fear tactics? If the church votes yes, but the conference votes no, then what? If a legal battle, how would that be done? If St. Luke's votes in favor of disaffiliating, is there any reason to believe the Oklahoma Conference won't accept our vote? And will the Oklahoma Conference let us leave? So these are all kind of along the same lines and sort of the same answer. In Oklahoma last fall, there were 29 churches that went through the process of disaffiliation, that all got their church votes, that met all of the requirements, and all 29 came before the Oklahoma Annual Conference, an especially called Annual Conference back in October, and it passed by 95, 97%, something like that, approval to allow those churches to disaffiliate. We have seen in other places across the United States, in other conferences, where some churches were not allowed to disaffiliate. I believe that there was a total of five total churches across the United States were not allowed to disaffiliate who had gone through the process. But again, there's over 2,000 that did go through the process and were allowed to leave. So there are 5 that has happened out there. It's not happened in Oklahoma. The spirit that I think we have experienced, and certainly what I would hope, and set St. Luke's aside, I would just hope that this would be the case in general anyway, is that if a church feels that God is calling them into a new direction, I would always hope that we would allow churches to follow where God is leading them. And that's not just for St. Luke's, that's for any church. And that's what we have done so far in Oklahoma to this point, and I hope and pray that would continue. Sunday's vote is our one and only time to vote and own our property, correct? That is correct. This does allow us to be able to disaffiliate under paragraph 2553, as Wendy was explaining earlier, while setting the trust clause aside so that we would actually own our own property. Will St. Luke's retain the parsonage as part of the disaffiliation? Yes, we would retain all of our property, including the parsonage, our downtown campus, our Edmond campus, our Asbury campus. We would be able to retain all of that property under paragraph 2553. The trust clause would not apply to any of it, so we would be able to maintain all of that.
Some of these are already answered, but one of them, we have several retired ministers, part of our congregation. When we disaffiliate, will these members still be able to be a part of St. Luke's? I want to say that Bob has taken the initiative and reached out to all of the retired pastors. Some he has met with individually and asked them for a retired minister, they have to have their membership at a local United Methodist Church. And the conference back in the fall sent kind of a threatening letter around to retired pastors that if they didn't do that in the future, their credentials would be removed from them. And so it sparked a lot of talk. And so we talked with the director of transitional ministries at the conference office and said, we want to be able to tell United Methodist pastors who are here at St. Luke's that, yes, place your United Methodist credentials at a local United Methodist church, but we hope you will still be here. And so individually and at a group meeting for retired pastors January 9th, we invited all the retired ministers, and here's what we said. We know that you have to place your membership at a United Methodist church, and as such, you may want to place your pledge there. You may want to give your money there to fulfill that obligation, but we hope you would stay with St. Luke's. And we got permission from the director of transitional ministries. In fact, she suggested a couple United Methodist churches that would probably be willing to work with us on that. And so for every retired minister that's a part of St. Luke's, we've asked them to stay and continue to be part of the ministry here at our church. How many United Methodist churches in our conference have already voted? What are the results? So you heard in the fall there were 29 that were voted upon at the annual conference and were able to leave. We have heard around 50, 51 will be voted on at this April's annual conference. I think there's probably under 10 that in the fall and in this spring at the local church level have not achieved their vote. And it's a very small number. Maybe under 5 actually, but it's a very small number at the local church level that haven't achieved that vote. So, and as we said at the U.S. level, at the end of 22, there were 2,003, and obviously it's gone up since then. And a couple about the language changing in 2024, is that likely? And I have my reasons. I don't think it's likely at all. I have heard for the past several general conferences from 2008, 12, 16, and even 19, every single one of those, people who would want it to be changed absolutely thought that that was the year that it would be changed. So every single one of those general conferences, this is the year the language would change, and over that time it actually only got harsher. I love St. Luke's, me too. Change is scary because of the unknown. If we vote to disaffiliate, what will change about St. Luke's? I can tell you on a Sunday morning, you won't see any change. We are the family of faith and will continue to be this family of faith, and so you won't see any kind of outward change. I think behind the scenes, how we obtain ministers will change a little. And I say just a little because every current clergy person really came to St. Luke's by an unorthodox way. The typical United Methodist way is the bishop and the cabinet think through all of the appointments and they send who they want to the church appointment. Every clergy we have on staff came by a different way. Everyone except Bob was brought here because Bob sought them out. And even in Bob's case, the bishop of Oklahoma at that time, Bishop Solomon, tried a very different approach, saying, I want to get somebody in to turn this downtown church around. And so he called to surrounding annual conferences and asked the bishops of those annual conferences, please send me your best names. And then the 5 candidates came here and were interviewed by the staff parish committee. Very un-Methodist. And they were unanimous and voted on Dr. Long, and we're all the better for it. So we've already been operating kind of in a non-traditional Methodist way, and we would continue to do that. I know it is scary for some that, oh my gosh, how will we raise up and train pastors? And I would say that one of the parts of the United Methodist denomination that has really fallen by the wayside over the past many years is the leaders that are coming forth. Right now you have over 75% of the churches in Oklahoma that have been in decline. And so I would say that the leadership model that has been developed and followed in recent years hasn't been successful. And so this is a great time to think of something new. Finally, personally, I want St. Luke's to be allowed to perform same-sex weddings. However, I know there are some in our congregation who feel differently. What is your message to them? How do we disagree while remaining one united family of faith? And I think that's a great question. So if you are someone who believes that you would like to see same-sex weddings here, somewhere here in this room is somebody who doesn't want to see that. Can we agree on the fact that we're called to love God and love one another? We're going to disagree. Do you know that we've disagreed with one another and we haven't all had the same beliefs for 133 years? And we have managed to do incredible ministry together despite those differences of opinion, differences of belief, because some of those are deep-held beliefs that we're passionate about. When we do ministry and missions, we never ask people, are you Republican or Democrat? Are you gay, straight? Are you Sooner, cowboy? We know that there's something more important at hand. We've always had differences of belief, and yet we've been one family of faith. I know that when I first came here, my very first time to St. Luke's was on April 19th, 1995. I hadn't realized it at the time. My father had been killed in the Oklahoma City bombing. At that time, I just knew that he was missing, and we were directed to come to St. Luke's. And I remember the brick wall that had all the names of people. My family came here before I ever came to serve. I actually didn't know that because I couldn't remember the church until I was speaking down the memorial. No one asked my family any of those qualifying questions to ministry. You simply minister to us. That's what we do so well here at St. Luke's. Yes, we have differences of belief, but can we all agree that when you look around this room, we love one another? You are our family of faith. When we sit up there for worship, we look out at your faces. You are so important to us. And I firmly believe that's the way it is in the body. And so we are going to continue to have differences of belief, and isn't that better? It helps us to grow. It helps us on our own spiritual journeys to not be surrounded by everybody who thinks just like us. We're going to stretch and grow, and we're going to be better for it. And so I would say that we're going to continue to focus on the greatest commandment of them all, to love God with our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Thank you.
We had another question that came in about finances, and the question was, what would be the difference in cost to disaffiliate now versus if we waited until next year to disaffiliate after paragraph 2553 has expired? And a couple ways I could answer that question. One is if we wait until the paragraph expires, what we would be doing is, as Wendy mentioned earlier, is we'd be negotiating a buyout, and that would be based on the value of our property and our assets. Between the St. Luke's Foundation and the St. Luke's Church, our property and assets probably would come in somewhere around $60 to $70 million. The way that it is with paragraph 2553, there is a disaffiliation financial obligation that every church has to pay to disaffiliate. That's based on three different categories. And I believe we have a slide for this, Brent. There's three different categories. The first is your unfunded pension liability. The second is your post-retirement benefit liability, and the third is apportionments. And so those three categories together, we actually just received updated numbers at the end of this last week for what those numbers would be, and it comes in at $2,163,841. So you can see that would be the financial obligation to disaffiliate now. If we waited until next year, all of our property and assets are well over $50 million. So somewhere in that neighborhood would be the difference of disaffiliating now versus next year, about a $50 to $60 million difference at least. The annual budget of St. Luke's is about $15 million, getting close to $16 million now this year. For all of St. Luke's, correct. That includes our downtown Edmond campus, our child care centers, our missions programs. Everything that we do at St. Luke's total is about close to $16 million. Also, to put this in reference for us, our total askings from the Oklahoma Annual Conference for our conference apportionments, for our district apportionments, and what we pay towards what's called mission and ministry items this year in 2023 is $563,921. Now, as we've seen over the last 4 or 5 years, that number has gone up significantly each year. So just at this year's rate of what is asked out of us, in the next 4 years, we would be paying this same $2.1 million anyway. So that maybe helps put it in a little bit of reference, a little bit of frame of reference for us. I can also tell you that our finance committee and our trustees and our administrative board have all reviewed and approved a plan for how to fund this disaffiliation financial obligation without affecting any of the missions or ministries that we do here at St. Luke's. We have a line of credit that we've had for many years now with our bank. We have not had to use that line of credit in many years. It's always just a nice thing to be able to have, but we have not had to use it. We would be able to utilize that line of credit to be able to pay this up front in order to meet our financial obligations. And then we would have the flexibility to pay that back over the next several years as we continue to see what interest rates are doing in the market and what's happening at our general conference in 2024. Because there is legislation that is already on the table for General Conference in 2024 from Westpath, our General Board of Pensions, that would cover the pension liability for every church. Our Oklahoma Annual Conference has already passed legislation that says if something changes in our pension liability at the General Conference level in the next, I believe it's 15 years, if something changes in that time period, they would refund any church that had already disaffiliated that amount. So there's $564,000 that we would be paying towards that unfunded pension liability. The legislation that's coming in 2024, there's no reason it shouldn't pass, would actually send us a refund a year from now to get that amount back. And so in the next several years, utilizing our line of credit, we would see, do we get that refund? We would see what interest rates are doing in the market. We would continue to be able to pay this down without affecting any of our programs and missions that we carry out. And we would be able to have this taken care of in just a few short years. I believe that's all the financial questions I had.
Sunday's going to be a historic day. It truly is going to be a historic day. Do not come at 5 till 2 and think that you're going to be voting. If you arrive in your car at 5 till 2, you will miss the vote.
Or run really fast.
There's no way. So we have improved the parking dramatically. We have all kinds of lots that we're now going to be able to have. People have been willing to say, you can come park here, you can park there. So I think the parking is going to be dramatically improved over what we were originally thinking. So, and go straight to the CLC on the south side here. And that's where you'll come in and be able to get registered. And that's, again, we have 28 stations. So we are trying hard to be able to get you through quickly and not have to be a long process, but still going to take just a little bit if we have 1,500, 2,000. I don't know. I originally thought it'd be a lot less than that. And then we saw how many people have attended these meetings, how many have gone online, and now we're anticipating really a big number. And so if that's the case, you'll need to get here so you can get registered. We're set up for 28 different stations to be helping you get through. We are going to be having box lunches. If you come and you are in worship and you don't want to leave, then you can get a box lunch. Or you could come and get registered and you could wind up then running over to the garage for a hamburger, or you can run over to Jimmy B's or wherever you might like to go. you can be creative, but get registered and then make sure you're going to be here a little before 2, so you can you'll be seated either in here, and when this fills up, then we'll be sitting in the Christian Life Center. If that fills up, you'll be sitting in the fellowship hall. We have places for ultimately everyone, and it'll kind of just flow down the road. So I've spoken with Dr. McCullough. Our goal is to expedite this and do it fair, to do it clear, to do it well. I really hope we're out of here in less than an hour. Now I have to tell you, O ye of little faith. The statement was you might be out of here, but not out of the parking lot. So other churches have taken a lot longer. I'm not going to tease you on that. There is no reason in the world it should take us that long. And we are trying hard. If we can start on time, and starting on time starts with you, because if we have people still getting registered, we're going to wind up showing grace, and that's so, yeah, it's going to be so frustrating. So if we're all sitting in here ready to rock and roll and somebody just showed up at 5 after 2. So be here. Help us out. We'll get in, we'll conduct our business, and we'll be able to be on our way. And the exciting thing is, we will then know where the family of faith wants to go. And that's what I'm saying. That's what this is about. We can love one another. There's no winners and no losers. It's where does the family want to go? And so we will decide that together, and then we'll start planning accordingly. Thank you for being here tonight. I did the opening prayer. You want to close us with prayer, Josh? And you're welcome to be on your way. We'll stand around for a while, but thank you for coming, and my goodness gracious, staying so unlike a Wednesday night alive crowd. You were great.
Let us pray. Almighty God, we are so grateful that for nearly 134 years you have led us. Your grace has gone before us every step of the way. You have been with all of those saints upon whose shoulders we stand, and we know, we trust, we believe that you will continue to go before us into the future, guiding us and leading us by your Holy Spirit and equipping us with the gifts that we need to be able to carry out your ministry. We pray that you would fill our hearts with love and with grace and with kindness, and that you would keep us close to you. Oh God, as we go through this Lenten season, as we make that journey towards the cross on Good Friday, we were reminded that on the other side awaits resurrection. There is new life. There is hope. There are new beginnings. And we know that all things are possible with you. For that we give you thanks. So bless us and be with us as we go forth from this place tonight. Watch over us and protect us. We ask this all in your holy name. Amen.
Somebody's got to do it.